Part 3 of About the S&P E-minis. S&P E-mini futures trade in what's called ticks. There are 4 ticks in each 1 point. Okay, kind of simplify it. There's 100 pennies in a dollar, right? So for futures, they actually trade in, we'll say, quarters, okay? So there's 4 quarters in a dollar, right? So for the S&P E-mini futures, there's 4 ticks in every 1 point. Okay, so if the futures moved, we'll say 10 points from high to low in 1 day, okay, that would be 10 points or equivalent to 40 ticks. Each tick is worth $12.50. So 4 ticks equals 1 point, which would equal $50. Okay, now kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier with the SPY, which is the ETF on the stock side, okay, each E-mini future is worth, is equivalent to 500 shares of SPY. Okay, so let's say the SPY, you would need to buy 500 shares to make that same $50 on the 1 point, right? So if the E-minis move 1 point, you make $50. Well, you would need to buy 500 shares of SPY, and you would need a 10-cent move, okay, of SPY to make that same $50, right? Because 500 shares times 10 cents equals $50. So that is it, but kind of going back to the margin and the leverage side of it, okay, you only need to put up $5,000 overnight, or we'll say $1,300 intraday to be able to make $50 off every 1 point. Well, if you bought the shares of SPY, you would need to literally put up $100,000 to make that same $50 on the 10-cent move. So that's where the real kind of the leverage side of trading the futures really comes in handy. The futures trade 23 hours a day, okay, Sunday through Friday. So the S&P E-minis trade Sunday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time until 4:15 p.m. Monday. They close for 15 minutes, which is end of day settlement, okay? Then they reopen and they trade from 4:30 p.m. until 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time for rollover. Okay, and then the new day begins and they reopen at 6 p.m. Eastern Time and then trade until Tuesday at 4:15. Okay, so then at Tuesday 4:15 they close for 15 minutes for the end of day settlement, right? And then they'll reopen at 4:30 and trade until 5:15 Eastern Time. And then they close again and they'll reopen at 6 p.m. Okay, and this cycle goes on all day until Friday evening. Now, Friday evening they close at 4:15. Okay, on Friday. They'll reopen at 4:30, and then they close at 5:15. Okay, on p.m. Eastern Time on Friday. They're done trading. They don't reopen until Sunday at 6 p.m. So those are the hours that the E-mini S&P futures trade. Now, all futures don't trade this time. So you might, now the NASDAQ, the Russell, the the Dow, they all are again close and trade the exact same time. But when you start looking at oil, you start looking at other futures, corn, different commodities, they're all going to have their own times. So you'll want to go to the exchange, the CME, the ICE, and get the exact times of all those different futures. So that's it for part 3, and the next video will be part 4 of how to trade the S&P Emini futures.